Hello, my name is Heather Landázuri, and I'm a third-year master's student here at the University of Maine. Before coming to get my graduate degree, I worked for 3 years in cultural resources management, which is what I'm going to talk to you about today. I'm going to warn you, this is going to be a rough and dirty rundown of CRM, but if you have further questions or are interested in it as a career, please feel free to reach out. So just as a brief overview, we're going to discuss what CRM is, what cultural resources are, who's involved in the process, and what CRM looks like in practice, and CRM careers, and yourself. Just as a clarification, CRM encompasses a wide range of professional spaces, and so what I'm going to be talking about specifically today is CRM as it relates to archaeology. But do keep in mind that that isn't the only thing CRM does. And we'll learn a little bit more about that as we talk about the actors in this field. So cultural resources management, what is it? It's just what it sounds like. It's a process that seeks to protect and manage non-renewable cultural resources by working with stakeholders and the federal government. CRM professionals are considered stewards of cultural preservation. So what that means is that we strive to protect it. We find strategies to protect it, especially in an ever-developing, ever-changing space and environment. And a lot of what we do is adhere to public policies such as Section 106. So Section 106 is a regulation that identifies a system of steps that are supposed to be taken to identify the cultural significance of a resource. And then it also requires that sufficient steps be taken to mitigate any identified potential threats or impacts to that resource. And this is done in tandem with Indigenous representatives, with community stakeholders, with the client that you're working for, and with the State Historic Preservation Officer or other federal representatives. So what are cultural resources? Well, the term cultural resource encompasses just a slew of things, places, structures, monuments, objects, practices, languages, even. It encompasses a lot. It's anything of cultural value, right? So you really want to think about that when you're trying to strategize protecting whatever it is. And I have a few examples here, some of which may be familiar to you, but we're thinking of, when we say cultural resources, we're thinking of things like historic structures, historic places, historic or prehistoric artifacts, sacred spaces, and even monuments that hold, local significance, such as, the elephant here, which is a local monument. And so when we go into this field and when we're working to protect something, we're working not only to protect the object itself, but the meaning that it has for the community around us. And we get something out of this exchange as well, right? We get data and the potential to better understand the spaces that we're inhabiting. But all of that is in service of being a cultural resource steward. So who's involved in this process? The fact is that you're working on a huge team a lot of the time. Sometimes you can be working solo, but many of the people and agencies involved in the process include archaeologists, the firm that they represent, Indigenous communities, sometimes more than one, depending on the complexity of the site, the client that you're working for, which can be anyone from a private homeowner to a private company, state agencies such as the Department of Transportation or even the military, institutions such as universities, and they also, often act as repositories too. So you're interacting with them on more than just, even a client level. There's a lot of interactions there. Certain specialists will be a part of your team. So environmental monitors and planners, historians, biological monitors. These are all going to be people potentially on your team helping to strategize development, and cultural resource stewardship. And again, so, contractors, private development companies, these are all going to be people that you're interacting with in the CRM realm. So CRM archaeology is done in a series of phases. Sometimes it ends at phase 1, and that's usually enough to determine cultural significance. And a lot of things are going to factor in there. But to begin, a phase 1 investigation requires a background literature review and record search. It requires potential pedestrian survey, as you see up here in this right-hand corner. It involves potentially doing shovel testing, which is when you do like a series of small pits to determine the cultural significance of a site, how much material is in the soil, and does that amount equate to the amount of activity in that area? Or can you tell anything from the amount of activity in that area? And again, all of this as it relates to cultural significance. Typically, this phase is sufficient to identify cultural significance and allows for either a National Historic Place designation or say it's a really, really potentially significant site, and so then you'll want to go into further testing, right? So that's where a phase 2 or phase 3 will come in. So a phase 2 builds on a phase 1, and it involves a more in-depth archival search, more field work, more rigorous excavation and survey. So we might try and expand the site and start surveying beyond where we think it is, just to be sure. We might do full units, as you see in these images here. Particularly this image on the left looks a little bit more like a phase 2, where it's a series of smaller excavations to really start to understand the site and its significance and meet those mitigation requirements, right? Because we're still trying to protect these resources, even if we're disrupting them ourselves. And then this could either evolve into a phase 3, or from a phase 1 survey, you can tell right away a phase 3 is necessary. And that's the most extensive phase. And it can sometimes involve the redirection of a construction effort altogether to avoid affecting whatever cultural resource it is. And this involves extensive excavation and starts to involve some of the specialized analyses that I had mentioned earlier, such as chronometric dating, zooarchaeology, soil analyses, paleobotanical analyses, all these different methods of investigation to get at what was going on at the site. And beyond that, we also do monitoring, which is when we go to a known development site, a construction site, and maybe it's been deemed good as of a phase 1 investigation, but they still want to monitor on site to make sure that, if they come across something more, then we can see through those initial investigations that someone is there that has the know-how to stop construction, to take a look and take note, and then either give them the go-ahead or redirect based on their experience. And so that's also a big thing that archaeologists do, is that we're there to monitor what's going on and making sure that we can handle whatever situation comes up next. So if you're considering CRM as a career option, there's a few things you should know. Minimum degree requirement is a bachelor's degree. A graduate degree is optional, but not having one may limit the type of work you're assigned or legally allowed to do. In California, for instance, I can't monitor jobs without a master's degree, but I can be on a field crew and do excavations or be on pedestrian survey. So there's certain levels of experience that you're either legally required to have or typically are liked to have prior to applying to a job. Another thing that's really important and really integral to getting hired is having some sort of experience. So whether that be a field school or an internship, that's highly, highly, highly recommended. And oftentimes it doesn't require, you know, extravagant amounts of money. You can find field schools that are kind of embedded within course curriculum, or you can look to local historic projects to see what kind of things they've got going on, if they're doing anything where students or young early professionals can get involved. There's a lot that you can do. I will say my first ever internship in anthropology or archaeology was an oral history project that was being put on by my local museum. And so, you know, there are certain entry points into this. You just have to look for it and ask questions and talk to people. Again, if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out. Thank you so much for letting me take your time. Bye.